We live in a time of reactionary opinions. Everything is a reaction to something egregious. And obviously, in reactions, there's lots of truth. Of course, feminism is bad. Of course, Marxism is bad. All these isms that are not Catholicism are no good. So we react against these things. But we really are all a kind of a product of our generation and our time period. So we kind of have a short-sighted view of history. I always go back to the Bible, as I think we're probably supposed to do that. And, when Proverbs and when it's talking about the ideal woman, liberals will interpret that and be like, look, she's a boss babe. She's out there, moving money around. It's like, well, no, you're actually misunderstanding the nature of what we would call work and career. We have this completely artificial way of life since the Industrial Revolution, essentially, where people have become producers and not creators. People have become employees and not artisans. And so the idea that you learn a technical skill, that you go and employ that skill in a certain enterprise or industry, and then that industry produces certain things that people pay for, and then your contributions are based on a sort of gradient scale of how much you're worth based on how much you produce. This is ahistorical. This doesn't exist until 200 years ago, really, at all in the world. And this separation of work and home is a completely arbitrary and artificial separation. So one of the issues with even talking about this, women working and so forth, is that even men are a part of this conveyor belt system that is artificial. It's anti-human. It's not human. It's not in line with the rhythms of life. It's not in line with the rhythms of the church. It's not in line with the rhythms of the seasons even. And historically, 90% of people were agrarian. So there were down times and work and things like that. And all men and women were some sort of artisan. In Proverbs 31, it talks about, the flax and the looms and things like that, making the textiles and the fabrics and things, and then bringing those things to market. But it also talks about her having servants, because anybody of any means had servants. Even in that book, Pride and Prejudice, they're sort of on the lower rung of the sort of middle class, but they even still hire a cook and servants because everyone had that. So women today in the sort of traditional world or the conservative Catholic world, there's this notion that, well, the traditional way of life is dad goes to work and he brings home X amount of thousands of dollars a year, and mom stays home and she homeschools the kids. And of course, that's a much better thing to do than what is currently expected in our society. Nonetheless, it's still not historical. It's still a reaction, a necessary reaction. I'm not saying don't we homeschool. I work, my wife homeschool, like we do that, but it's also just not the way people lived. And I've never read the Catechism of Trent from start to finish. I've obviously cited it many times, but I had this big copy from 10, and I was like, I'll put it on my nightstand, and I'll start with the introduction, and I'll just go through the book. So I was reading the introduction the other night, and I don't know if every edition of the Council of the Catechism is the same, but the one I have, the introduction goes through how free education through the parish is as old as like the 5th and 6th century. And it has these documents of all these different dioceses exhorting their priests that they have to, at their parishes, they have to have education for the potential priests. Before they had the seminary system, they were educated differently, and they have to have education in the basics of the faith and and reading and writing for even boys and girls that were children. And so no one was a homeschooler. No one was like, okay, husband's going to go to be the blacksmith. He's going to go sell everything. I'm going to be at home and I'm going to teach him. No one did that. So there's just so many things going on in our modern life that are so unnatural, anti-human, and artificial that it's very difficult to draw these arbitrary lines about what is objectively acceptable and what is not. Of course, I believe there are massive dangers in higher education for men and women, and therefore I believe that girls should be shielded from that as much as possible because of the temptations to adopt these extremely anti-human lifestyles and so forth, and men maybe have a better reason to go to learn certain skills because of the economy that requires it and so forth. But even there, I can't draw a hard and fast line and say no technical skills or no education is ever necessary, because circumstances are very complex in different places. And we're all sort of dealing with this anti-human modernity that is completely arbitrary and artificial. So even talking about this, like, I think Harrison did a very good job, because you can't even really be as black and white as people want you to be. And I'm saying this as a guy who wrote a book on masculinity, and I exhort women to be homemakers. I think it's a good thing, but it's just really not that simple as much as people want it to be, because there's so many factors involved.